You'll know, most of you will know that obviously my father was an NDP member of Parliament. And I'm proud of the work that he did, I am. And I was recruited locally by the NDP to run, and they vetted me and approved me as a candidate. But Tom Mulcair didn't want me to run, and it's his loss. He didn't want me to run because I stood up for my father. When my father was on a humanitarian mission to Gaza, representing Canada as a retired parliamentarian with European members of parliament and Jewish Israeli peace activists on a 43-meter boat, and he was seized illegally in international waters and thrown into an Israeli prison, and we didn't hear from him for 4 days. And I was the only one in Nanaimo. My mom was away at conference, she did some media, but I answered a lot of questions. And I sent a letter to the NDP after talking to my own MP. And I asked her, like, are you going to speak up for my dad? And she said, no, I'm not allowed to. And so she told me to talk to the critic. So I talked to the critic. And he said, well, we've made our public statement, and that is that both sides need to show restraint. And I thought, what do you mean by that? You know, my dad's on a 43-meter sailboat facing the 4th largest navy in the world. Do you want him to throw medicine overboard? Is that what you mean by showing restraint? So I sent a letter, a grumpy letter. I sent a grumpy letter to the NDP caucus, and somebody leaked it to the media. It was leaked to Peter O'Neill, who phoned me up the next day, and I was at a pipeline rally in Victoria, and he phoned me up and said, did you say this? Did you write that? And I said, yes, I did. And it said in the letter, Tommy Douglas would have stood up for my father. And Tommy Douglas wouldn't have muzzled his MPs. They would have been allowed to speak for my father in an international incident. And Tommy Douglas wouldn't have been whipping the rest of his MPs to be silent on this issue. So, you know, I went through a process of trying to appeal for a month, and then I sent a letter to my supporters on a Friday at 4 o'clock on Canada Day long weekend, and thought nothing would happen of it. I came back on July 2nd, and the letter had gone viral, and the media was calling me, and Elizabeth May called me. And she asked me to run for the Greens, and I said no. I said no to her. And so she asked me if I would work for the Greens, and if I would go take the Green train across Canada and document the trip. And I said, I'd have to read your policy book first. I want to make sure that what you're about is what I'm about. When I read that policy book, I was amazed. I was like, holy crow, this is what I've been waiting for. I've read a few policy books, but this is a vision. So I got on the Green train. I traveled across the country. Elizabeth May asked me if I was going to run. I said no. So I came back after this trip, and I found out that the Green Party was the only party to vote against the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement, and the NDP had abandoned their policy on trade, which says that they won't support investor-state provisions, those provisions in trade agreements that allow corporations to dictate to governments, to say, we are going to override your democratic authority and your sovereignty, and we are going to sue you if you don't do what we tell you to do. And we're going to demand payment. So that's when I quit the NDP, took out a Green Party membership, and Elizabeth May found out I did that. And she called me up and she said, will you run? And I said, maybe.